Hello, folks, and welcome to another episode of the Proof of Waste podcast. Today, our guest is going to be Professor Tim Duncan. Professor Duncan is the former head of technology for the CFPB and a nationally recognized expert, educator, and innovator in finance, technology, and law. Thank you so much for joining our new show, and thank you for being here, Professor Duncan.
Thank you. Thank you. Nice to be here.
So I always open the show by asking our guests where you're from, what's your background, how did you find out about crypto mining?
Well, going way back, I'm from Lubbock, Texas, where I was born, but gone a long way since then. I'm in Boston now. I encountered crypto early on in working on a couple projects for some of the big banks in terms of people getting excited about blockchain stuff and crypto and Bitcoin, and then trying to come up with some use cases, some applications, primarily around institutional finance, derivatives, institutional derivatives. And so I worked on a few projects along those lines, trying to kind of come up with some use cases. And that was sort of my introduction, my deep introduction to sort of trying to understand them and meeting folks in the crypto sphere.
Are there any organizations you work with right now, or are you like an independent entity?
No, I teach at Boston University Law School. I teach a course on digital money and a new course coming up with on AI and the law. And then I do consulting for legal cases, business strategies, and things like that, both in fintech and in crypto.
So do you have, since you are a financial expert, and I just was talking about, I was kind of debating this with a bro earlier today, is Bitcoin a currency? Can I ask you that as an expert in the field?
It's semantics, and so whether or not that's worth arguing about, I don't know.
Yeah.
I think that, I guess I generally say no, because it's, not a unit of account. Nobody prices things in Bitcoin or any crypto for that matter. So as long as that translation needs to be made back to the dollar or euro primarily, I wouldn't count it as a currency.
Yeah, one of our friends, Adam Smith, who's been on the podcast, he talks about the ultimate crypto question, which is, is blockchain, is Bitcoin doing anything better than what already exists? And he hasn't found, he's pretty exhaustive. He doesn't believe that he's found anything. And he always refers to the fact that Bitcoin is priced in US dollars. So that's pretty funny.
I always think that's fairly revealing. So
yes, yeah. And it's not about the Bitcoin, it's about the USD behind it. Was there a precise moment or a gradual kind of progression where you saw behind the curtain and thought, wow, this isn't everything that they're advertising it to be?
Well, working on these projects primarily because, everybody sort of was one of those crests in Bitcoin popularity and crypto and blockchain popularity. And the CEOs at the big banks hear about it, and then they call the CTO and they ask them what they're doing, and then the CTO, generally knows nothing about new technologies, so right. They start scrambling around and calling people that they work with. So, and can we come up with a project that I can tell my CEO that we're learning about Bitcoin and crypto and blockchain? And there were some use cases in the beginning that were talked about in the crypto world, which sort of gave people ideas. And it's just sort of going through those step by step in terms of looking at how things are being done now and figuring out how crypto, Bitcoin, or any sort of crypto token or coin could fit into that. And it's the thing about crypto is that when you mash it all together and say a lot of buzzwords with it, and try to pretend it's some sort of magic and tell people that we're going to be left behind. China will own the U.S. in 10 years. If it's a lot of rhetoric, and what happens is it's very difficult to dissect it into specifics with regard to what the technology is, what it is. But once you start to do that and try to apply it to use cases, and use cases that I've just heard crypto people talk about a lot, oh, this would be perfect for this and perfect for that. It kind of falls apart, I think Bitcoin's a neat idea. I mean, it combines a lot of very interesting things, and Satoshi was obviously pretty brilliant in putting those things together. I don't think he anticipated sort of maybe what would happen and how it would happen, but so I'm not, I haven't been like an anti-crypto, anti-Bitcoin person from the beginning. Mm-hmm. And I still think it's interesting that potentially, and I have friends over at MIT that worked on the Fed CBDC and other, that are still advocates. And so, but at the end of the day, what you got to look at is that blockchain is just a database,
right?
Just a ledger. It's a place where, you record transactions, or you record ownership and transactions, and potentially liabilities. But it's just a ledger, and there's ledgers all over the place. I mean, you can build a ledger with Excel any time you want. Banks have ledgers, and savings and loans have ledgers, and people keep their own ledgers to manage their budgets and things like so. And it's not a very good ledger,
right?
It's not a very good database. And when you try to apply it to high volume transactions and important transactions, highly secure transactions, private it starts to fall apart. First of all, because of latency. I mean, just it doesn't work to process things. If you got a 10-minute processing cycle, it's not going to have any capacity to really work in the finance world. And secondly, it allows front running. So companies are front running now in the market, in milliseconds in terms of monitoring the market and measuring it and putting in trades, So if you got a 10-minute latency or anywhere over a millisecond, the financial applications are pretty limited. So, and then, so as you went through it, and started working on these projects, getting back to the CTO, you start talking to them about things like latency. And, then you start talking to them about validation, and start talking to them about miners in, Eastern Europe having access, and, the CTO quickly goes, wow, I'm not going there. And, so they've come up with some things, private blockchains and things like that, but it's just kind of BS.
Yeah, and I have found that almost like every project that Visa is going to adopt this, or blockchain is being used to track lettuce with Walmart, they're usually very like small trials, and they either fail or are not picked up largely. I believe that I'm going to always keep citing the New Zealand stock exchange. That was a massive failure. So it's redundant. It's not efficient, which is the whole, we've that's what technology has all been about, is becoming more and more efficient. And this is one of the most redundant, inefficient, wasteful. I mean, specifically talking about Bitcoin and Bitcoin mining. I mean, I don't mind people having ledgers. It's using a mid-sized country's worth of energy and water to keep that ledger when, how many people are actually using Bitcoin? Do you have any idea? I've been asking this for 2 years.
Do you believe, Coinbase or the Fed? So there's
right. Yes.
Discrepancy of, I don't know, 50 or 60 million between those two estimates of people that are using crypto actively. I mean, I think it was at 10%, and I think it's down below that now, closer to 5%. People sort of actively paying any attention to it. And that's it. The market's up, so we're kind of in a crust right now.
Yeah, it's up, but it kind of has this feel of gloom, even though they're like at 60, 64 right now. It's funny because right after Riot Platforms announced they were building the world's largest Bitcoin mine here in Navarro County, that was like late April, early May of 2022. And then the Terra Luna collapse happened, and then the FTX collapse happened, and it went all the way to 17. And I was like, surely this won't continue. So have you seen these boom and busts? How long have you been? I mean, you said a long time, so you must have seen these cycles. And have you thought, oh, this is over, and then it comes back like a cockroach?
Not like everybody else, I wish I bought it when it was $2, but it's I don't. I mean, I don't. I'm really lousy at predicting markets, so I'm a, I'm sort of a counter piece of wisdom in any kind of market you talk about. So I tend to be wrong more often than I tend to be right. So I mean, I have no idea. Bitcoin could go to $500,000. I don't know. I mean, it's just, it doesn't make any sense to me if it's at 60,000. So why not have it make sense to me at 500,000? I, you know, I suspect that eventually, the shine will wear off, and I don't think it'll, I don't know where it'll go to. But it'll go back 10, 15 years or whatever, not be worth a whole lot. And the latest boom seems sort of, I mean, the interesting thing is that the market cap has not really increased much overall in the crypto markets. And that's with the addition of, one crap coin after the other every day. So just that alone would be indicating that the market cap should be going up. It is not.
Yeah.
So, the Bitcoin shares seems to be higher and higher between ETH and Bitcoin. You're just seeing less and less of the other part of the market. So at some point, I don't know, people wake up. I mean, to me, like DAOs are really interesting, because 2.5 years ago, I've worked with a lot of nonprofits, and I talked to them about crypto and some of the things you guys are working on. And some of the crypto people were had been in DC, wised up, and decided, well, let's just give some of the nonprofits some money, that might be asked their opinions on things. It was smart because they shut them up. And I'd say, well, what's going on in terms of what the people you represent and your causes and things like that? How does that tie in with that? And their answer was DAOs. Well, we feel this is decentralized autonomous organizations. It's good, a new morning in nonprofits, and in that conversation. I mean, when's the last time you heard somebody mention a DAO?
Yeah, so our first guest for the podcast was author and scholar Peter Howson, and he wrote extensively about these grand, ideas for good and how they actually pan out in real life. And I mean, if Bitcoin and crypto did half the things they claimed it did, it would have had a mass adoption. We would be using it. I often cite my 72-year-old mother who uses her Apple phone, and I pay for everything. Apple Pay? Yeah, iPhone. She's not using crypto, and Apple Pay is only like 7, 8 years old compared to Bitcoin, which was supposed to revolutionize in finance like any day now, 15 years running.
I started a company in '98, one of the first internet companies focused around finance. And, I can just tell you the use cases were apparent, and they were all over the place. And there was people executing on use cases. And of course, some of them would fail. But, the use cases that made sense panned out. It was a question of, who is going to be the winner. In a lot of cases of, videos online were, in the beginning, nobody even considered that would be possible. It was bandwidth increase and compression algorithms got better. All of a sudden it became, but 2 years before that, people thought, well, videos on, we could put movies online and access that. And eventually, I mean, it panned out. Who the winner was, I mean, YouTube, like A lot of the big guys won a lot of the big stuff, right? But the use cases were just all over the places, and they were real and they were solid, and they weren't sort of this, you know, half big, vague kind of,
Just around
Chinese,
the corner.
we don't do it sort of thing, And there was a lot of people into it that wasn't about making money. I mean, certainly it was partly about that, right, in terms of entrepreneurship. But there's just it was just like really cool technology, and people were doing a lot of really interesting things and changing the way things are done. And that just,
Yep.
it ain't crypto. I hate to tell you that, it's just, that ain't what crypto is about. I mean, it's completely different, and I've been there on the line trying to come up with use cases, and I can't. And I haven't seen any yet. And other than the fact that you've created this database that, you know, a lot basically implements a lot of crime and
Mm.
people hide transactions and launder money and send money where it's not, so that's kind of about the only use case. And if you're into that, then I guess that's why it keeps going too. So
Yeah, we've had several guests, and we talk about that quite often. I mean, when the ultimate crypto question by Adam Smith is, are there any, non-criminal uses that are, because they've been great for, I mean, ransomware. I believe John Reed Stark talks about ransomware. It would not have proliferated to the extent that it has without Bitcoin and crypto. Dallas County was attacked by ransomware hackers, and the county judge and county clerks, the office was completely immobilized, paralyzed. So, and they're doing it to hospitals, they're doing it to vital infrastructure like pipelines. It's very worrisome. And John Reed Stark at least says without Bitcoin and crypto, that it would not be possible, or to the extent that it has now.
yeah, that's absolutely true. It's enabled the whole criminal enterprise industry out there. So
yeah, so that's when our elected politicians, get behind this thing, like all of mine have here in Texas. It really begs the question, like, why are y'all supporting and touting and shilling this like deeply criminal cartel? Even like the Bitcoin miners, there's a lot of question marks on origin of ownership and what exactly are they doing. Do we know for a fact that they're doing what they say they're doing? Are they possibly using those computers for other means? Like the President Biden recently had a Bitcoin mine dismantled within like a 1 mile radius of Warren Air Force Base. So there's some concerns, all over the place. It's very shocking when our elected officials like Ted Cruz is now mining Bitcoin.
yeah, well, I've been around politics for most of my career, and money talks.
Correct. And the lobby is spending as much this election cycle as like the pharmaceutical industry is. So to me, I think it looks like they know the writing is on the wall, and they're trying to entrench themselves in the financial system as much as possible. What's the digital central banking digital coin that all the Bitcoin guys are like super against, like Ted Cruz?
CBDC, central
Thank
bank
you.
digital currency.
All the acronyms. Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you explain what that is? Why are the Bitcoin guys upset about this? It's like Ted Cruz is trying to make a law to, make it illegal to do one of these. What is going on here?
Well, I mean, you're basically nationalizing a stable coin. It makes it harder to even pretend there's a use case for crypto if you have a digital US dollar. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. Um, the arguments for and against, I mean, there's the impact on the banking world and things like that. I mean, there's logical arguments against it, but I think the crypto people are against it because it would work better, you know.
It might actually be used.
And it would be the government doing it. So of course, they've sort of embedded themselves in this sort of anti-government rhetoric. It's sort of, the
Until they want subsidies.
Yeah, I mean, it's been around for centuries. I teach part of my course in digital money. I go back 3,000 years to start with in terms of what is money and what it's about. And spent some time beginning in the United States. We talk a lot about the 1792 Coinage Act, the first Coinage Act, where the United States started minting money. And there's been this faction since forever in the United States, which has been against having the central government have
Hmm.
a role in money, specifically for fear that what they might do and how they might control things. And it's a lot of it's silly, but going back historically, some of the people that were more for civil rights and individual liberties in the country were, part of the reason they they were anti-banking, anti-U.S. money, in part because of that. They thought it would infringe on people's liberties. So it's it's people acted as sort of a novel position in terms of being anti-Fed, and but it's the same arguments that have been around for 300 years that get repeated in different ways. So
Yes, it's often been said that crypto and Bitcoin is speed running, hundreds of years of finance in this couple decade and a half, where they're realizing why we need anti-money laundering laws and know your customer laws, and why we need time for settlements. So I think that's one of the funniest things about crypto Bitcoin is it's supposed to be like this amazing, incredible technology, but there's like no reverse transactions, no takebacks. You type your password in wrong and you're screwed. So
yeah, there used to be a lot of talk. I mean, again, another that disappeared along with DAOs was the putting real estate titles, your house on a
right.
blockchain someplace, and I mean, I think that's just another use case that was talked about, was hot for 18 months or something, and now it's just completely disappeared as reality set in that it would never work, and that registers of real estate perform all sorts of functions, other than run a database. I mean, that's just a part of what they do, and so somebody's got to sort of go through things and make sure they make sense. And if there's a controversy about who owns what or if a lien's valid, you need a mechanism, some sort of land court to be able to deal with that. So, it's just sort of example after example of things that get talked about and then just sort of fade away.
And constantly moving the goalpost when it comes apparent that it's totally absurd, their claims. um in your experience, your long tenure in the finance and education system, are there any really big wins that you're proud of, or being legislation that you've been a part of, or anything like that that you think applies or could be helpful in the realm of crypto?
Well, I mean, I was one of the people involved in helping make Dodd-Frank happen now a long time ago, which is probably the most significant consumer finance legislation that's occurred in the last, I don't know, 40, 50 years, and created the CFPB, which was, I think, the first new consumer agency in 40 or 50 years. And so I'm very proud of that. I mean, I was happy to be a part of that. I think we were able to accomplish a lot of things that had been needing to be accomplished, but only became enabled to do that after the financial crisis. And so it's it's boom and bust in terms of these kinds of things. You're always going to have, it's the old, I rob banks because that's where the money is. Well, that's what happens with finance. I mean, that's where the money is. So lots of people come in and try to figure out ways to get some of the money out of the pot, and trying to respond to that is, from a legal standpoint, legislative standpoint, always takes time. So it's I mean, I think what's going on now in the crypto world is that the crypto people are still sort of, thinking like the government's a viper and going to come get them. But the thing is, like, the government's more like a boa constrictor than a viper. And it wraps around you and it's in no hurry and takes its time. But eventually it starts to contract and squeeze you, and, you know, before you know it, it's too late. So, I mean, I think that's kind of what's happening now
Mm.
in crypto world. And um, some of them sort of sense it, I think, and, are trying to deal with legislation. But yeah, I mean, the other aspect of that too with legislation is, they're spending a lot of money on lobbyists, and lobbyists are happy to tell people that things are going to happen. And
Mm.
they're happy to generate a lot of smoke, and lawmakers are happy to say things that get them money. But I think the thing that crypto doesn't realize is that um, there's no money in DC in resolving issues. You know, it's if you resolve an issue, the money stops flowing for that issue. I mean,
Right, right.
it took decades to get anything done in healthcare because of that. And crypto people sort of feel like um, people are listening to them. Well, yeah, stop writing the checks and see how much people listen to you. And so I think they're in a track right now where they're going to keep doing what they've been doing forever with little progress. I mean, they've made no progress whatsoever in terms of actual laws being passed and the law being changed. So I think it'll take time, but eventually they're going to have to follow the same laws as everybody else.
We hope so. And that's incredible. Thank you so much for your work on the CFPB. For those who aren't familiar, can you tell us what that was?
The CFPB, what it is,
Mm-hmm.
it's for Financial Protection Bureau. So I worked with Senator Warren before she was senator on that, and quite a few other people. So it was in response to the financial crisis and a lot of things that had led up to the financial crisis, and particularly a lot of predatory lending, lending to people that couldn't afford it, people that couldn't pay back, and sort of get strung out on high interest rate loans. And then they sort of brought that to the housing market, which created all this crazy inflation in the housing market, and people lost their homes. And so it was responding to that, and basically treating consumer finance, consumer banking as something similar to pharmaceuticals, where you had the FDA, or flying an airplane, so you can get on an airline and be safe with the FAA. So, and the idea being that in consumer finance, you don't expect people to go read about how an airplane works before they get on an airplane, and you don't expect people to go get a PhD in chemistry and pharmaceuticals before they decide whether or not to take a drug. So consumer finance is equally complex in many ways. And so the idea being that you just don't have a market that's caveat emptor, that puts the burden on consumers to read, a 50-page user agreement on the web with embedded with all sorts of trickery and, everything else. So trying to balance that out a little bit with creating the CFPB that would monitor the market and have the power to basically go look and find what's called UDAP, unfair practices, deceptive acts and practices in the market, and put it into those.
Yeah, the 2008 crash, I know it affected almost every American. My mom lost her house during the '08 crash. She had a balloon mortgage. And I know that it's small, but it's huge. One of the things that the CFPB did was make credit card companies tell you, if you pay the minimum, this is how long it's going to take for you to actually pay your credit card off. And this is how much you're actually going to be paying if you just keep paying the minimum, because you're really just paying interest. That it's so small, but it's huge because you get a full picture. It's transparency. which I think Americans don't get enough of. I think a lot of corporations, and this is something that we see with the Bitcoin miners and crypto a lot, is the absolute lack of transparency, even going so far as to sue the federal government, Riot did, to keep their energy consumption a secret, because knowledge is power. As soon as the American public understands how much these guys are using worth of energy and how it's driving up all of our bills, people change their tune. So same thing with the with that it's a transparency body, and I love that, because we're just kept in the dark about so many things. So
Didn't the lieutenant governor down there come out with a statement this week or last week about the reality of electricity
yeah,
use in Texas and
yeah. So we had a 7-hour hearing on the Texas grid in the Texas Senate Banking and Commerce Committee, and it was quite revealing. They have projected that peak demand on the Texas grid is going to almost double, and most of that is going to be because of Bitcoin mining. We've known this; it's been happening. So when Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick put out that tweet, I was like, "Where have you been? I've been talking about this for 2 years." So it's, but up until that moment, I was completely hopeless that Texas was going to get its act together about this because of the big money. Like Ted Cruz, my own personal House Representative Cody Moldner, they are regular speakers, paid speakers at crypto conferences. Cody Harris put forth a non-binding resolution to protect the rights of Bitcoin miners. And so we won't discriminate against them by, asking for cities to uphold noise ordinances. But yeah, I was very hopeless until last week that was a really damning hearing, and there was a lot of stuff generated from it afterwards. So, like, holy smokes, I think we might actually get our act together about this here. We'll see. Like you said, there's talking is easy. It's the doing part.
Yeah, and money does a lot of the talking. So there's actually an article I think just came out in the New York Times, Washington Post about the use of energy by crypto and what's going on with AI now.
Oh my gosh.
And the impact that AI is going to have on energy usage. And it's not incremental. It's
No.
serious stuff. And, somehow the benefit of these technologies, needs to be considered and weighed against the costs, right? And people have sort of traditionally viewed technology as kind of free, search is free, right? Search doesn't cost society anything. Well, when you attach AI to search, it uses 10 times the amount of electricity to do an AI search as it does to do a regular Google search. So I think there's a reckoning that's going to be coming in a lot of these areas in terms of, environmental costs and usage of energy to, is it worth it? What are we getting out of it?
Yeah, we have members in the National Coalition Against Crypto Mining who are also dealing with data centers. So it's like a double whammy.
Yeah.
Now crypto, these guys, after the halving, so, there was just a big event in Bitcoin mining where now it takes double the amount of energy to mine the same amount of Bitcoin. I think they see the writing on the wall. And now a lot of these miners are pivoting to to AI, saying like their infrastructure, the computers are useless for AI, but the infrastructure that they're building, these, massive hundreds of acres just getting mowed down to put up a bunch of energy hogging computers. And for what? I always say, I don't know if you believe in climate change, but climate change is real, and we should be extremely, discerning about the energy, the finite resources that we are expending, and, cost benefit analysis kind of thing.
Oh, yeah. This article talks about the fact that they actually identified coal plants that they've put back online and,
Right.
extended their lives because specifically due to tech usage, tech data centers.
Yes, our second podcast that just actually released today, Friday the 21st of June, is with Yvonne Taylor. She's with Seneca Lake Guardian. Digital Greenwich Holdings Energy, something like that. They bought a coal plant that had been decommissioned, brought it back online to mine Bitcoin.
Mhm.
Here in Hood County, there is a steam powered gas plant that is hosting a 300 megawatt Bitcoin mine behind the meter. So it's directly plugged up. 25% of the energy produced by this power plant goes directly to the Bitcoin mine. And now they're talking about making a phase 3. So another whole power plant. And it's like, well, instead of building another power plant, why don't you just cut off the Bitcoin mine? So yeah, it is. And for what? I mean, I don't believe there is real legitimate use case. A lot of my guests think this is all a scam. So at the end of the day, we're burning a mid-sized country's worth of energy and water, and it's all just going to implode. The house of cards is going to fall, and then we would have done all of this for what?
Yeah. The other interesting thing that I think is happening is that crypto folks welcomed in ETFs and BlackRock and Fidelity and is sort of legitimizing crypto. And, they're how they trade is interesting, right? Because they don't need to trade on blockchain. Trading doesn't happen on blockchains. I tell people that even crypto people don't seem to get that trading does not happen on blockchain. Blockchain is just a ledger. It happens outside the, and so, there's already this huge institution called Depository Trust Corporation that maintains a record of ownership, a ledger for, thousands and thousands of stocks and other securities. And they're really good at it. Haven't made big mistakes in it. So I think you're going to see large institutions have accounts and there'll be centralized ledgers, and trading and recording will go through outside of the blockchain, outside of the blockchain world. So, I mean, there'll be an entry on a blockchain someplace with a gazillion Bitcoin that'll belong to some a custodian someplace, right? And the custodian will actually hold the record of who BlackRock or Fidelity or whatever owns what portion of those things. So it's an inefficient database. And I think you're going to see the institutions use it less and less and less, which could be interesting.
Which is another hilarious point of irony, is that this was supposed to usurp or supersede traditional finance. And now they are like begging our federal government to, let them participate in TradFi and give them certain privileges and protections that I thought they didn't need that. I thought Bitcoin was like the most amazing thing ever. That you're going to be the next, global reserve currency. Like, I can't even say that with a straight face. What is your worst fear about crypto industry? Like, we are very concerned about the FIT 21 bill. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but is there something really concerning that you see on the horizon?
I think that if they get their way, what they'll do is carve out all sorts of exceptions to securities and banking laws because, somebody's using a token or a coin or, a blockchain. And of course, what will happen if that occurs is that you're going to see huckster is going to, it'll be back to 2017 in terms of, token world. And also the traditional firms then will just say, well, let's not call this a stock, let's call it a token, right? And if we call it a token and we have our own little blockchain here, then we don't need to comply with securities laws. And, we can take deposits. We don't need to comply with banking laws, so
right.
It's you, if you erase the laws because something is called something different than a stock or security or bond, it's going to be problematic because you'll have all the crime, all the fraud that would have occurred in TradFi, and it will just move to crypto to avoid the law.
Yeah, they want their hooks. They want in on the big bucks. Like so far y'all have been able to keep them outside, and they are really trying to become part of traditional finance, which would be a disaster, we believe.
Yeah.
Oh, have you gotten to speak to any of your local, state, or national representatives, like your actual representatives? Have you talked to them about crypto? Have you talked to other, or administration officials? Is there anybody you've been in contact with?
Yeah, I mean, I know people in government, and I've talked to them generally about it, just because they know I've had experience in the area, and they'll ask me what I think. I have not been involved directly in sort of, an official lobbying effort of any kind, but more sort of giving people information from the ground, I think, that they can use in their decision making.
And how would you rate you said you're in Massachusetts. How would you rate your state's response to crypto and crypto mining? What would you give the Biden administration if you were grading them? And what do you think about Trump coming out as like super pro Bitcoin right now? If you
Money
could say,
talks. I can say it the whole time, the entire podcast. Money talks, money talks, money talks, and politics. And it's talking now. It's talking here in Massachusetts. My own Congresswoman, Kathleen Clark. I would say, well, I need to watch my language.
I know. If you want me to edit anything out, we can.
No, she, for some reason she's gone pro crypto, and she doesn't understand it at all. I mean,
Yeah.
what she understands is that the Democrats did some of that money that's getting handed out, right?
Right.
And I don't think she knows Bitcoin from Ethereum, right? But she takes the money, and she knows, some of her Democratic partners in crime take the money, and so we're not Texas, but liberal blue state politicians take money just like conservative red state politicians.
Yeah, for sure. And that's, I think probably almost every episode we've talked about getting money out of politics too. Just as an aside, it's like so obvious. Why are we doing this? There's a really funny meme that said, "I'll believe corporations are people when Texas executes one." So,
Yeah.
If you could talk to any one person about crypto or crypto mining, who would that be?
To what end?
I don't know, like informing, educating, persuading, whatever past, future, alive or dead. One of our guests said they wanted to talk to Satoshi Nakamoto.
Well, it's funny you say that, because that's what I was just about to say. That it would be interesting to say to him, "Hey, here's what's going to happen. Now, what do you think?"
Yeah, I often put a picture of these giant, massive Bitcoin mines and say, "Does this look peer-to-peer to you?"
The environmental impact, and maybe you need to go back to the drawing board, because this is going to happen. It'd be interesting to see what he had to say. No, I mean, I don't know who else that would listen.
Yeah.
A lot of people, the people I think that want to think about this sensibly probably are going to think about it sensibly and will call me, or people like me, to, get some more information and background, and call me to potentially help with cases and strategies. But it's, they're in the right place. They just need details. And so I can't think of one person who would be enormously influential at this point that hasn't sort of made up their mind or is taking the money. So
Right. I wish we had oodles and oodles of money like the Bitcoin bros do, because I would love to do some educating on Capitol Hill, to the extent that they get to Dennis Porter's flying state to state shopping out this right to mine bill. So it does feel like we are fighting asymmetrical warfare. They have very deep coffers, and we are just this like all volunteer you know.
Well,
Um,
one other thing about that is keep in mind that the banking industry is not enthusiastic about crypto. Yeah,
yeah.
so
And
uh, they don't make a lot of noise. But on the other hand, community banks are very anti-crypto, and community banks have a very strong lobby in DC, and you know they sort of know how the game is played and can watch crypto, you know, card off a couple token wins that really don't change the law or do anything significant, but keep the lobbyists getting paid. But I think when it gets down to doing more substantive things and things actually changing, it's going to impact community banking and banking in general. You, the lobbying will just get stronger and stronger. I mean, they're already lobbying against it, so it's as
yeah.
they start, if and when they start to gain traction, I think the banking industry will pull out the stoppers and start making a lot more noise. And
Mhm. And okay, so last one, and then we're on the home stretch. Is there anything that gives you hope for the future, for American finance, for the collapse of Bitcoin? I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Yeah. What are you hopeful about the future?
I kind of think about that. Being older, I don't have to think about it so much. So, but it's I think that in finance and technology, we're really at an inflection point. I think that when I started doing the fintech stuff now, 30 years ago or whatever, there's this huge opportunity, all sorts of opportunity in technology, with the internet coming along. You had the venture capital industry, booming, starting to boom. And, you know, back then, companies didn't do technology, for the most part. And I mean, IBM was the big tech company. They built these huge mainframe computers, right, which nobody uses anymore. And but the idea, in a large bank or an industrial company, the technology was important. They were just like the guys in the basement that did the payroll. And in large part, and I was happy to be happy I was an entrepreneur back then because the potential use cases and the opportunities abounded. They were everywhere, and you didn't have 1,000 million people trying to become entrepreneurs. It was still kind of a weird thing and then we just had this period 25, 30 years where tech, and everybody wants to be an entrepreneur and everybody wants to become a unicorn. And but most of all, I think that it's different from when I was started entrepreneurship and around the internet. So is that the big companies have come in and basically usurp the opportunity, right? I mean, you look at it, companies see tech as key to their overall success. I mean, it's not just an operational payroll thing, it's how do they go to market? How do they operate with their costs? How do they reach consumers? And so every company sort of considers itself a tech company right now. And when opportunities arise, there's billions of dollars. AI is a perfect example. Um, what's been if you're a entrepreneur trying to set up a company in AI, good luck. I mean, what's left after Microsoft, Google, and Apple, and everybody else have already put in $50 billion. It's just table scraps made, and you're seeing VCs, the only people they can give money to are the people taking the table scraps, and you're seeing huge losses and complete failures to achieve goals in the venture capital industry, particularly around finance and fintech. So I just think we're at a big inflection point, that the sort of unicorn period was kind of the height of the whole tech money boom, and I don't know what's going to come next, but I think it's going to be interesting. And crypto, I think, was sort of part of that apex as well. So I just think mindsets are going to change. The world's going to change in terms of what kids want to grow up to be.
You've heard the term the golden age of fraud. Do you think that we are in like the golden age of fraud and it is kind of waning? It's on its,
Um,
we're always going to be in.
I just think it's so much money went into venture capital, and this idea that there was going to be this never ending gold mine of tech opportunities for entrepreneurs. People could go out in their garage and start $1 billion company. It's just ended. Those opportunities just aren't there anymore. I mean, there's still some there, but just not at the volume there was 5, 10, 15 years ago. And so I think as that mindset starts to fade, the interest in crypto will start to fade as well, given that there's really no use case for it and there's no real profitability to it outside of the criminal world.
Yeah. Yeah. Is there anything that you'd like to promote? Do you have any books out? Where can people find you? How do we need to contact you?
You can reach me through T Duncan at bulaw.edu. It's DUNCAN at bu.edu. If you want, I'm on Twitter and not that Tim Duncan, given your former basketball player down there.
Yeah.
And, what's the other one? LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn as well. So
Awesome.
looking at writing a book on casebook for legal casebook for digital money. Hopefully starting next year. So we'll see. It's time permits.
We'll have to have you back on when it gets published. Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much.
Podcast, and thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us. Y'all, this has been another episode of the Proof of Waste podcast. Today we had Professor Tim Duncan of Boston University. Thank you so much, Professor Duncan, and have a lovely weekend.
You're welcome. Thank you.
If anything you saw today makes you want to act, we need your help. Join us. Fill out the form below, and we'll get you onboarded into the National Coalition Against Crypto Mining. Thank you so much for watching.